TPAs do everything from claims processing, customer support, plan design. To an employee, they are the insurance company.
These people are still like faxing stuff back and forth, or they're using PDF. There is no AI in here at all.
Legacy TPA tech stack is going to be some version of MS-DOS, COBOL. Hey, we know that these are the pain points. And then we say, hey, this is how we do a 50x better job of customer support or care coordination. We leverage AI. What we found is by going to these conferences, by engaging with folks on LinkedIn, this is the best way for us to actually generate leads. I spoke to a lot of older founders of TPAs and they said, my close rate on the golf is like 50%, right? Versus like 10, 15% off the golf course.
Hello, everyone. This is the No Fixed Out podcast, and today I'm here with Sid Sinha. He's the founder of a company called Avant Health. So you're in the insurance space, and you told me something that blew my mind yesterday. The way that we think about health insurance, especially the ones that's covered by our employers, are not what we think. So at least in my head, the way insurance works is you pay some kind of flat fee every single month or maybe every single year. The insurance company takes a risk. And whenever something happens, let's say you crash your car or maybe you break your foot, your house catches on fire, whatever, they underwrite whatever assets that you have and they pay you out.
Yeah.
In employer-sponsored healthcare, 70% of the time, this is not how it works.
That's correct.
Tell us how employer-sponsored healthcare works.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about the broader market of employer-sponsored healthcare. There's essentially three models, right? So the first one is, what you described, what we call fully insured, where you and your company pay some sort of premium to a United, Cigna, Aetna, right? They take care of everything, right? From provider network to claims, whatever you need, they go to them, right? Then there's a second model called self-insured, right? This is where employers are actually bearing the cost of healthcare, right? They're paying for the claims cost. Usually there's some sort of reinsurance, right? Or what we call stop loss on the back end. And then there's a third more nascent model called ICHRA, right? Where an employer can give you, $500 a month, some sort of stipend, right? Where you can go and pick a plan. It's called an individual health plan, right? And there's a broader individual market. We play in it's primarily in that second bucket, the self-insured world, where these employers then hire out what's called a third-party benefits administrator. And what's wild is out of the 150 million employees, 70+% are covered in the self-insured market, right? And so the last example, maybe it's probably most helpful, is fully insured versus self-insured. Let's say you have a $50,000 knee surgery, right? In either model, you can still have, let's say, like a $5,000 out-of-pocket max. In fully insured, once you pay that $5,000, right, the insurance company is going to pay the $45,000, right? Versus in the self-insured model, let's say, again, you're paying $5,000 out of pocket. Your employer is actually paying the $45,000.
Got it. And then you said there are these institutions called TPAs that handle all of the role of the traditional, insurance company. They handle the claims, they pay out the hospitals and all of these things that insurance typically deals with. The company that you're building is trying to disrupt the TPAs, correct?
Yep. Yeah, TPAs, third-party benefits administrators. I don't know why they call it TPAs, right? But yeah, exactly. So TPAs do everything from claims processing, customer support, the provider networks, right? Plan design. They can, to an employee, they are the insurance company.
Got it.
What just most employees don't know is that they're not the ones carrying the risk, if that makes sense.
Got it. And I assume these people are still like faxing stuff back and forth, or they're using PDF. There is no AI in here at all.
No, hardly. The TPAs, the common TPA tech stack today, legacy TPA tech stack is going to be some version of MS-DOS, COBOL, Microsoft Access, right? Like that's probably the best, variety of tech stack that I've seen.
Gotcha. Who's the end user of this? Is it going to be the TPAs, the end user of Avant? Is it going to be the TPAs themselves, or is it going to be the employer?
It's actually going to be employees. And so the end user for TPAs is employees, because we have the whole front end member experience, right? When you go to an insurance app, a Blue Cross or Cigna app, we are the equivalent of that. So there's an Avant Health app, right? That you would go to. You would call us if you need anything. And then we also, because again, the employer is technically the risk bearer in this case, right? We actually have, a portal like data that we show employers, right? One of the benefits of going self-funded or self-insuring is that you get access to your own data. And so we have a whole section for employers as well.
Gotcha. I was listening to a podcast with the ex-HubSpot CEO interviewing the current Intuit CEO. They're both in the small and medium businesses space. And I think you guys are also playing in that arena. And one thing that the Intuit CEO said is that it took them 5 years to get into SaaS, mostly because most of their customers were not asking for SaaS. Are any of your customers asking for AI at the moment, or are you just like trying to sell them something that they don't know they want yet?
That's a great question. So it's, do our customers want AI, right? Like, I think that's the core question here. And the way we pitch it to, there's two sets, right? So we sell primarily through broker partners, and then our end users or our end customers are employers, right? So for brokers, we actually do pitch the AI element, right? And because they understand how AI can actually transform the business broadly. For employers, we never lead with AI. We actually lead with, hey, we know that these are the pain points. We hear that these are the pain points. Can you confirm that these are the pain points, right? That we're solving for, right? So it could be cost, it could be member experience. And then we say, hey, this is how we do a 50x better job of, a better job of customer support or care coordination. We leverage AI, right? So like AI is kind of the leading end of the lagging end of this.
Gotcha. Can you explain what brokers are for people that don't know?
Absolutely, yeah. So talk a little bit about brokers in our world. Most employers have a broker that serves as a strategy consultant effectively, right? A broker will say, hey, I can help you with your workers' comp, with your health insurance, any other needs that you would have as a business, a broker can help with. And they're effectively a strategy consultant.
When did you guys start this company?
So we started it's funny, we actually started earlier in January in 2024, but for the first 4 or 5 months, we thought we were building an AI tech stack, a software suite for third-party benefits administrators. Learned really quickly why it was so hard to actually build for them, work with them, and then we decided we just have to rebuild this from scratch.
Gotcha. And it's my understanding that in the very short period, even if you started like early 2024, maybe after it took you guys 6 months to pivot into this later version, you guys were able to get a lot of traction with these brokers. Give us an idea of what kinds of customers you have today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, talk about our customer base here. Our primary go-to-market is through brokers. And so what we've been doing is we've been finding a combination of, the larger brokers that we're going after, right? Because one, they have a larger book of business, but many of them have forward-thinking individuals within that, right? That are interested in the types of health plans we're designing and administering. And then we're also going after what we call the regional benefits advisors or brokers, the consultants who really want to design custom health plans and then figure out, some way to actually administer that health plan. So that's really our kind of bread and butter. And what I would say is within the employers, right? So these brokers then have this book of business that's a set of employers. We're seeing success in anywhere from kind of like the 50 to 1,000 employers that have 50 to 1,000 employees, because these small and mid-sized businesses, they want those benefits equivalent to large companies, right? But nobody's been able to serve them historically. And so we see a lot of opportunity within that segment.
And did you say something like you guys are servicing, some of the top 10 of these regional brokers?
Actually, yeah. So from a broker partnership perspective, we're serving and we're partnering with 3 of the top 10 brokerages in the country today. And, hopefully this next year we'll be able to move that number up to, 6 or 7 at least.
Gotcha. That's very impressive. What I want to spend pretty much the rest of this podcast talking about is how you are able to close such big clients. I imagine selling to brokers, you're dealing with people that might not understand AI as much. Start us from like how you start looking for these people all the way to how you're closing them.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit about our process, right? Going after these brokers, going after our customers. What we look at, one of the interesting parts about our industry is that there are some decent conferences, right? Actually, some pretty good conferences and some organizations that do a good job of bringing folks in the self-insurance world in the ecosystem together. And then, so we have a presence there, which I'll talk about in a sec. And then at a high level, the other avenue we found is actually LinkedIn, right? That's where a lot of our broker partners, right? Employers, not so much, but broker partners, right, in particular, spend a lot of time on. And so what we found is by going to these conferences, by posting on LinkedIn, by engaging with folks on LinkedIn, this is the best way for us to actually generate leads, right? And one of the more interesting aspects, right? So let's maybe break both of them down. When we go to these conferences, right? These conferences tend to have, the booths, kind of the full shebang of like everything that's going on. But really the magic is, can you have these, the side conversations that are happening at the bar, right? Or at the coffee shop. And this is where we know which broker is going to be there. And again, because we're on LinkedIn, we understand how brokers are thinking. And so we target certain ones that are aligned with the types of health plans we're administering, which we can talk about later, but they're more of what I call alternative health plans, right?
So are you like on Luma looking at attendees and going to places that have the same attendees that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's the insurance industry isn't as forward thinking as having Luma quite yet, but they have their own proprietary version of that. And so we are, we do a lot of prep work for the conferences. And then the more interesting part about one of the more interesting parts about how we found business is a lot of flying. Spent a lot of time, myself, our, SVP of growth, like we travel quite a bit. We are meeting people in cities for 2-3 hours. We're meeting people in airports within in between our travels, and in person in our industry, having that in-person relationship makes a really big difference. And just to that effect, the last piece here is golf, right? Like golfing is just such an interesting. It was this is where a lot of folks come together, right? I spoke to a lot of older founders of TPAs, and they said my close rate on the golf is like 50%, right? Versus like 10-15% off the golf course, right? And so I learned golf last year and, have started golfing now, and we're starting to actually somehow see the ROI of that already.
That's very interesting. So I guess when you're looking at shows and movies, things like Succession or anything else, you kind of assume that, golf is where all business happens. We spent some time in Alabama. Actually, we were trying to like cut on burn, and we moved from New York to Alabama, and we were living right next to a Top Golf. And we would go Fridays from 9 to 12, trying to learn golf because we thought, we're going to go to San Francisco and this is how we were going to close deals. It didn't really happen for us because we're in the consumer world, but
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see that, in the B2B, especially in these like legacy businesses, golf actually plays a huge part.
It's a catalyst. It's crazy.
So, and like, is your subject line, do you want to play golf next week? Like, what do you, how do you explain people go?
I don't lead with golf because I am not that good, right? And what I've realized though, consistency is it's actually, I thought more people were consistent at golf than what I've actually witnessed. But regardless, most people are still better than me. So I don't lead with that, right? You play to your strengths here.
That makes sense. You guys fundraised a couple of $1 million. I don't know if you guys did any accelerator things like that. You guys went straight to the big VCs. You have Long Journey on your cap table, which is a very prominent VC here in San Francisco. We hear a lot from our friends who want to be founders. You got to do YC, you got to do one of these like early stage accelerator types. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you kind of don't need that? First of all, are you a first-time founder? Or
First time.
Okay. As a first-time founder, it's even crazier that you're going direct. Why do people not need like a YC type thing to fundraise?
Yeah. So talking a little bit about our strategy on fundraising, right? I think going through the accelerator program, if you get into one of these accelerators, I think almost always, especially as a first-time founder, the positives outweigh the negatives, right? And just some of we applied very selectively to a couple of accelerators, didn't get in, right? And what was fascinating is then you think about what strategy looks like, right? Because part of this is how do you access a network, especially when you're potentially like out of network, right? And like what I'll call out is my brother is a founder and he's done a great job, right? He's a couple of years ahead of me on the founder journey, and he's been critical to my journey as a founder and the folks that he's introduced me to. But what I think that has resulted in is if you're not going to go down the accelerator path, right? What I would advise and what I advise every founder is, can you find a few of the earliest believers in terms of like angels, right? I think angels play a very critical role for folks like me, and they have been, right? And what I found is that angels that were, former founders or operators, particularly in the healthcare insurance world, were probably the most critical to getting us going. And then once you have a set of angels that believe in you, they can then bring you out to the broader community, right? To the venture community, because that is similar to an accelerator. This signal it's a high signal, right? And so I would say like that has probably been critical for us.
Gotcha. I guess when you're speaking to these investors, on top of it being a great idea and, AI, everyone's, putting some money into AI, there's some regulation changes that are happening that are requiring these like insurance companies from being transparent. Did any of the VCs that you're speaking to like hearing this? If so, can you like dive deeper into what the regulation changes are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime you see legislation around highly regulated industries, that creates an opportunity, right? And I think VCs are very good about capturing on that opportunity. And so a couple of legislative elements that we've seen broadly. One, I talked about just the introduction of a entirely new healthcare model called ICRAs, right? Individual contribution HRAs, right? It's maybe not entirely new, but there were elements that essentially it turned it into a new model, right? The other is, and where what's been a catalyst for us is we've seen legislation on pricing transparency. So the prices, get this, before 2022, you did not know the price that an insurance company had negotiated with your doctor for a specific service. It was a black box, right? And you would get the bill 2 months after, 3 months after, and you're
And like the doctors weren't allowed to tell you either, right? Like they were under some kind of like NDA. They weren't.
yeah, there's some nuances, right? In some cases, it's not that they couldn't tell you, it's often that they didn't know because of how the rates were negotiated, right? Because the doctors who are providing the care aren't the ones negotiating the rates. And so again, all this obfuscation is like a feature, not a bug, right? And like people win on arbitrage in this industry. And so it's been really fascinating. This legislation's come out and the data's not perfect, right? But the fact that it's out there and like people are building on it, right? There's so many companies in the last couple of years that are doing, taking it to the provider world, they're taking it to the insurance world. And so that legislation has been critical. The other part of this that's been, I think we're seeing early proof of what this is going to, early validation of what this is going to create, but transparency around how people are making money in the industry, right? A lot of people were making money under the table and still are, right? To be fair. But now this has to be disclosed, right? Don't get me wrong. People that are going to make money under the table are still going to find a way. But now this legislation mandates disclosure of how brokers, how benefits administrators, pharmacy benefits managers are making money. And that's going to be huge for the industry in the longer run.
Gotcha. It's no secret that the U.S. healthcare system is fucked. How much of the history do you know? Like, how did we get here?
A great question. We probably do not have enough time over the next couple of days. But the shortest version of this is, let's take a step back. What was healthcare? It was something was wrong with you. Doctor would come home, and take care of you, right? Doctor knew you, knew your family, right? And then you start to get to World War II. This is where you started to see challenges with wages. And then, someone came about it. Blue Cross Blue Shield actually played in what is now Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? But came and played an interesting role. Broadly, the pitch was, hey, instead of, raising wages, let's actually offer benefits, right? Let's add this to an employee's total, what we call total comp today, right? And so then the question was, okay, that's happening on the coverage, the employer side. On the caregiving or the provider side, it was, well, could we start to create coalitions or groups of providers that can, potentially create preferred pricing? Or, I think the intent was initially, there was no malintent, maybe is a better way to say it. But how all of that's now transformed is you've got, okay, well, you're adding in these employee benefits, right? Instead of comp, right? Or we're providing this. You've got these insurance companies that are saying, well, we can give you the negotiated rate at some, because we've got volume. What ends up happening though is it's crazy. The largest owner of providers in the world is United Healthcare, and they're an insurance company, right? So they've taken this to their advantage, right? And so it's, again, give you a very like short warped version of this, but from both sides, right? Provider and payer or insurer, right? Where there was positive intent has just been completely warped into like taking advantage of people effectively, right? And so we're at this point now where, you can say for the last 10 years, it feels like we've been hitting this like inflection point. But I would argue the last year in particular, where premiums were the renewals on insurance premiums, right, were the highest they've been in 15 years, right? People are pissed. The average premium for a family of four in this country last year was $27,000. Let's say your employer pays 80% of it. You're paying, 8, 9K. Then you're going to have another 8 to 10K deductible out of pocket max. So you're still paying 20K before, your insurance actually kicks in, right? In what world, right? For some people, this may be the case, but in what world do you think your family's healthcare is going to cost $20,000, right? So there has to be an alternative. And like, there's a great group of people building that. And, we're part of that cohort.
That makes sense. I like how you guys are trying to fix it from inside. Our business is saying, screw all this shit. You don't need to pay 20K. Let's just have you fly out to, Germany, where it's going to cost a fourth, a fifth of it to get your whole annual healthcare needs. And, I think both need to kind of fight.
It's a multi-pronged attack. It has to be, right?
Yeah.
Because like everybody, getting to people is probably the hardest part in healthcare, right? The people that actually are the beneficiaries of healthcare have never truly been able to buy directly, or they've not, the broader arc of, call it justice or just the broader arc of justice in healthcare has never trended towards the actual utilizers of healthcare, right? But we are finally starting to see this in various capacities, right? Whether you're going direct to consumer or for us, we're trying to effectively build, and we're still within the group health insurance world. So like employer sponsored insurance. And I think there's a broader question of should healthcare be, coverage be just completely disconnected from employment, right? Which many thoughts on, but putting that to the side, like, can we emulate free market dynamics, right, in a transparent, ethical way? And like that's what we're thinking about.
What do you think of the Zooks?
It's a
First time in one?
yeah, actually, yeah, first time in these. Not been in Waymos, but like feels like a more chill experience, right?
It's like a living room, right?
People, yeah, literally. You're gonna hang out with people. Let's ride this around. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, it's like you like a work. You could work from this.
So you can work from this. You can drink and drive. You can play poker, right? Like get a nice table in here, play poker.
Dude, Zook should co-sponsor this podcast for you.
They should, yeah. We've been tagging them on all of our expos every time an episode goes out. And no response so far.
They're owned by Amazon?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I believe so. But they're pretty cool, except when it rains. Like one raindrop and
really?
It stopped working. They need to upgrade their LiDAR or something. Like, yeah. No, this is definitely the future.
It's crazy, just the modalities on the streets of San Francisco.
It's very interesting. Oh, when's the last time you came here?
I don't know, like 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Oh, okay. So you've been here since like the whole AI.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm here probably every 2 months at least.
Gotcha. What does your brother do?
So his company is a healthcare data compliance company. So the short version is when a pharma company or a biotech company is doing some sort of like drug launch, they need to understand their users, right? And so there's all these different types of data sets that you have to put together in a HIPAA compliant manner.
One thing you told me yesterday was that for business like yours, being in San Francisco might not be the best choice because that you guys are not based in San Francisco. Where are you based? And make a few arguments to why you guys chose where you are.
Yeah, location for a startup is super interesting, right? For us, generally, I subscribe to the thesis that SF or New York is, if you're building a venture-backed startup, best places because you've got access to capital and talent density, right? In particular for health tech, insure tech, New York makes a lot of sense. But one of the interesting things for us, right? So we're based out of Chicago. And what's fascinating is the insurance industry. It's pretty massive in Chicago, right? Like that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest places for insurance, right? I guess other than Hartford, Connecticut, right? But like, let's put that aside in Chicago. So there's a lot of insurance companies, and more importantly, there's a lot of brokers, right? That are either have offices like headquarters or they're coming into Chicago. And so for us, from a commercial perspective, Chicago makes a lot of sense. What I will say is talent density is pretty interesting, right? Engineering, I think we'll see in the longer term, but anything operational related, any ops roles, right? Chicago has that because of the insurance industry, right? So the folks that we've just, we increased our team by 30% recently. And the folks we brought on are folks that have expertise in their industries, right? Like very good at what they do. And that's critical for us, right? Like we need a specific kind of expertise. Where I will say, I think I actually won't make the case is access to capital, right? I think that's a key question for us is like SF or New York is the best place to be able to raise venture capital. But for long-term, team growth, I am very bullish on Chicago.
Do you feel pressure from your investors to move to San Francisco?
A little bit. I do,
okay.
Right? And I think there's no malintent behind this, but I think as they're thinking about, right, how do they position us for success, right? It's hard enough building a company, right? So you think about kind of all of the various elements. We do feel a little bit of pressure. And, I think this part of it is, do we continue to outgrow expectations, right? If we can do that, then I think we'll get less and less pressure. And as we, get further down our journey, right, as a company, and you can establish yourself, right? I think there's a case to be made where we could stay in Chicago.
Do you have a co-founder?
I do.
What does everyone in the company do?
Yeah, so I've got a co-founder, CTO. He's comes from the venture startup world. This is his fifth startup that he's co-founded, and he's got a couple of exits as well. The rest of the team, it's a combination of engineering. We've got customer support. Our head of clinical member experience, she's fantastic. She used to be the face of 3 million users at a previous digital health company, right? And again, we are doubling down on we believe that we're going to have the best member experience as a TPA of any TPA, right? So it's mostly around ops and engineering. And then we've got some recently hired on the account management side as well. And so that probably is the broader composition of the company.
And then are you requiring people to live in or to be in office in Chicago?
So, good question. From a company breakdown perspective, about half of the team today is remote because out of the first five of us, four of the five of us had worked together in the past, actually. And I knew that these were the best folks for the role that I wanted, for the roles that I wanted to hire for. And so they're all remote. And then a majority, last five hires, four of them have been in Chicago. One isn't, but four of them have been in Chicago. And so ideally, we're going to build a critical mass outside of Chicago. Excuse me, in Chicago.
Inside Chicago.
Yeah.
Were you in Chicago when you started this company?
I was, yeah. We moved to Chicago about 9 years ago for my wife's medical program and have just stayed since. And I said, love the city, right? I think, best city in the summer, best city in the country, one of the most underrated food cities.
Nice. I haven't spent too much time in Chicago. Next time I pull up, I'll hit you up and we can grab some bites.
No shortage of places. I got you. We'll give SF some run for its money on the culinary scene.
Awesome. What is it like being married and running a company?
Man, daily basis, it is different. I just taking a step back, like, just have to say, being married, right, when you're running a company, my wife is phenomenal, right? When we went into this, and for some context, right, I mentioned my brother's a founder, right? So had some sense of like how chaotic it could be and had some founder friends, right? But you never know until you're living it. My wife and I chatted about this and she was fully on board with it. And I think, again, neither of us realized like it's always harder than you think it's going to be, right? And so we went, had her support, went down this path. And what's interesting is, on a certain day, her job could actually be harder. She's a hospitalist, right? She has these crazy 10, 12-hour days. And, on our best day, right, when I'm not traveling, I'm working in Chicago, she comes home from work, we have like 2 to 3 hours together, right? And so you really learn to optimize your time, right? Because when you're married, you've decided to like go through, trials and tribulations together. And for us, it's figuring out how do we, one, just get time together. And so, what I look at is like, are there 1 or 2 days in the week where I can actually like come home earlier, or like, how do we split out cooking, right? To make it easier. Do we end up eating out more often? We do, right? Because we're like, well, we want to value the time that we have together. Right. And so I think we are making decisions on a daily basis to figure out how do you spend more time together. Right. And like what I will call out here is, and maybe somewhat of I don't know if it's quite a contrarian take, but when you're building a company, that company is almost always the most important thing. But for me, family, my wife, right, and my parents, but like my wife in particular, right, she has to be the priority, right? And like I wouldn't have a company, right, if it weren't for her, right? We wouldn't be in this position. And I think it's just this old adage, right? Like you have to work every day at it. We literally have to like, maybe every 2 days we're like, hey, what do the next like 2, 3 days look like for you, right? Let's figure out, are we going to be home at the same time? Like, are you, some days she's off, right? Like then, so can I actually go into the office a little bit later, right? Can we optimize that time? So kind of harping on that piece, but it's like we are making decisions in near real time to figure out how do we spend more time together.
Are there any heated fights that come from you being a founder and like not having time to spend together?
Yeah, we do have arguments, right, about just founder lifestyle. And like it's not so much around not being able to spend time together, but I'll give you two examples. One, which, she's right on, she's a healthcare, provider, but sleep. For me, I have never been a good sleeper. And like, I think it is somewhat of a strength when you're a founder, but, I think we will feel the toll of this later in life. And so I think it's been great having her to just
Tell you to sleep.
Figure out, yeah, just tell me to sleep. But also, this is one of the few things where like I need to be doing this, right? The other example is actually, prior when I was working for companies, right, we would love to travel, right? Like once a quarter, once every, 5-6 months, would love to go somewhere, even for like 2-3 days, right? That is so much harder now, right? But it's this balance of like, I know that she is working these crazy days, these crazy weeks, and we can't not travel because of me, right? Like she needs some way to have peace of mind, mental, like visit her friends, like whatever it may be, right? And so what we've learned to do, right? And again, this is where we're like trying to figure this out. Like when we are traveling, right? Can I take a Friday and travel like in the morning or whatever, but like still work? And so one of the things that we haven't quite perfected yet is when we are traveling, I'm often still working, but we're trying to find like, can we carve out windows where we're like both actually like fully in the moment present, right, when we're traveling. And so I think that one is still a work in progress for what it's worth. But, it's not a question of do you stop traveling, because I know this is something she likes. I like it too, right? Like we love this, but what travel used to look like is very different than what it looks like today, right?
Do you have any kids?
We don't, not yet.
Okay. How long do you think you're gonna wait until having kids?
That's a great question. That, I hopefully that is imminent. We've talked a lot about it. I think, her, rightfully so, her ask has been, can you have some can you have some level of stability? And she understands this is a startup, right? But like some relative level of stability. And it feels like we're very close to that at this point. And so hopefully soon.
Gotcha. Okay. That's pretty awesome. I think I don't know. I have a lot of founder friends. I don't know if I know many married founder friends. In my head, it's still kind of unclear whether, on one hand, you're single, but you spend a lot of like mental energy going out on dates or thinking about partners and stuff like that. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
At least, in my personal experience, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, damn, it's much better to get married and just like lock in so you can unlock that piece of your mind to actually focus on your company. And then on the other side, it's like you're with a human. You got to spend time with them, and it's unfair.
It's a whole separate set of dynamics, right?
Exactly. I wonder which one is more of a burden.
Yeah, that's a great question. When you're kind of weighing the two, obviously I'm biased, right? But I like, my brother isn't married yet, right? And so like we kind of talk about this sometimes, but even with my bias, what I would say is if you think about this just as maybe a net effort perspective, right? And like minimizing like the noise, the friction, right? What I know is that on our worst day, right? On my worst day, something goes, terrible, right? Something for her goes terrible, right? We have each other to rely on, to come back to. Whether, in founders, I think, whether it's a spouse, a partner, if you have somebody to rely on, like that makes a huge difference, right? On your worst days. And often for founders can be other founders, friends, right? But the depth of being able to rely on someone who you're married to, I think is such a saving grace that you don't realize until you're like reflecting on it. But knowing that no matter what happens, right? You can expend no effort, right? You can just be a terrible person, right? Which you shouldn't be, right? But, everyone has bad days, right? And then the depth of that relationship, I think makes a difference. Like that's what pulls you out of this, like, morass that you may be living in.
That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of family, your brother has been influential in your decisions. When I speak to my siblings, they're really anyone that wants to be a founder. My first instinct is to tell them not to become one. Is that what you heard from your brother as well, or was he very encouraging?
It's funny. It's actually the other way around. And my brother is about 5 years younger than I am. And
okay,
he's about 2, maybe 3, probably like 2 to 3 years ahead of ahead of me on the founder journey. And he's actually been complete opposite. He's like, probably literally 3 years before I started my company, he's like, you got to go do this. Just go start your company. Right. He's like, there's never going to be a better time, right, to go start a company. And it's actually been the opposite for me. And, it's funny, like how you would react to certain people, right? But I said this to my brother, right, was when he graduated, and like, I assume he felt similar. It's like, there is no one else of whom I have higher expectations, right? And so I think there's some core belief that like many of the people we surround ourselves with have this capability, right, to do it. But, my brother, I think just for whatever he saw, he's like, you have to go do this, right? And some of it I would also consider naivete because he's got nothing to lose, right? And he has a different set of dynamics. But
how old is he?
He's 27.
Okay, so he's been out of college for some time.
Yeah. He was out of college for maybe a couple of years before he started his company, and he did something in college. Well, he started something in college as well. But I think that's what gave him the kick. And then just, he's been pushing me. And at this point, don't really believe in regrets, but, upon reflection, like, I think I would have loved it if I, wouldn't have been as experienced, but would have loved to do this even earlier.
What was it like growing up in your household with like 2 founders? Do you have other siblings?
No, just the 2 of us.
Both kids of your parents are entrepreneurs. Were your parents entrepreneurs as well?
It's funny. My dad was for a period of time, but, we grew up, I was born in India. My brother was born here. We moved to the US when I was about 4. And so, have grown up in Nashville, Tennessee most of our life, right? A suburb of Nashville. And it's, you go through that, like, what I would say, like, is a pretty conservative, typical like life, all the way from like kindergarten through like high school and college. But my parents, the expectations were to be stereotypical a little bit, doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? In particular, I think like doctor, engineer, because my dad has an engineering background. My mom's actually, our mom's a teacher. And, so we went down that path. I thought I was going to do engineering. I actually I did this like Department of State study abroad program when I was in high school. And I just, I was studying abroad in Egypt, opened my world. And I was like, I'm going to go major in international affairs. My dad was like, nope, you're going to major in engineering. And I was like, what, maybe I'll try both, right? And so then I applied to schools where, depending on where I got in, I would major in one, minor in the other. Ended up majoring in engineering, industrial engineering, minoring in international relations, and went on to become an engineer, consultant, do whatever, project manager. And then my brother just completely broke the mold, right? He just shattered started coding in high school, and then went to college, and threatened to drop out of college. My parents just could not grok this concept, right? My brother stuck it through and just started a company in college itself. And so he really broke the mold for my parents. And my dad had done this before, even before us, right? I was super young, right? When he was, with a couple of his cousins actually had, started a company. But we didn't hear too much about that. But when my brother broke the mold, I think it actually became a lot easier for me to become a founder. And so it is interesting, reflecting on the dynamics that have changed in the household, right? Now my parents are like, yeah, kids are founders. They're like doing XYZ. Parents love to share these stories, right? Like on random articles and stuff that come out. Yeah. But, there's a time we remind our parents of like, Dad, you did not want us going down this path.
Yeah. There's some mental health, situation in my family. And when I quit my nice job at Meta to start my company, I had a very serious call from my sister saying, "Hey, are you mentally okay?" My parents did not want me to quit my job and chase this dream, but
so many people strive for that. Like that's the dream, right? And when rightfully to each their own, right? It's like working for one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah, it was very hard for me to understand this because, when I was working at Meta, I would try to recruit my friends like that were working there, my teammates. I'm like, hey, let's leave this, whatever, and let's build this company, whatever. And one day, this guy sent me a gun. He was like, hey, he's Brazilian. He was like, coming from a place where I come from, working at Meta is the dream. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Yeah. Stop telling me to freaking quit my job and join your company. Yeah, it was very hard for me to believe that could be true for some people, but yeah, that's the case.
Yeah. So to each their own. And when you started this off by saying you tell founders to start something, right? When I talk to people that are thinking about this, and what do you care enough about, right? To stick it through, right? Because ultimately the grit will matter, right? And do you care enough about a problem? Do you want to solve a problem, right? And then ideally you have some knowledge in solving that problem, right? We're in healthcare, and I think folks coming from outside of healthcare can actually benefit healthcare, but it's a question. It's much harder to do, right? But I digress.
How much of your motivation is the mission of the company versus making money?
Yeah, look, when I think about my motivation for the mission, I say two things. One, if you have been in healthcare, if you operated in healthcare, and then you want to get found in healthcare, either you are naive or you are crazy, right? So in this case, the latter, right? I think for me, the belief that things do not have to be so bad, right? There is not only that they can improve, but is there an inflection point that I believe we are at where I can actually drive something, right? Myself, my team, we can actually drive some change. That is what I think it inspires, motivates us. And I speak for the team on this, right? And so it's a $5 trillion industry. We'll make money, right? But we want to make money doing right by others, right? And the way we talk about this, on our worst day, right? Our job is get somebody to the right care at an optimal price as efficiently as possible, right? Everything else is BS, right? But if we can do that on our worst day, answer the phone call for somebody, help them out, right? We've done something. They said, there's enough money to be made in healthcare. Not concerned about that.
Gotcha. The last piece I want to touch on is hiring. I struggle a lot with hiring. I struggle even more with firing. I haven't had to do that yet. I need to. Did you get any tips from your brother or other investors? I know you said you have some superstars working for you. How do you think about recruiting?
Yeah, it's recruiting. It's a good question. I think so. In my past life, I have had the privilege of building out teams of 20, 30 plus people across different functions, and have learned some of this is nuanced industry based, but have learned, I think, what makes somebody a really good operator? And then I have to think about like what makes somebody a really good early stage operator, right? And the things that I solve for at a surface level are, one, do they have problem solving skills, right? Like that's like table stakes here. But two, can they create structure out of ambiguity? Right. That's so important for the work that we do because you're in an early stage startup. You're not going to have a defined role, right? And even if whatever we call you, right, like you're going to have to figure out, maybe you're answering the phone one day, right? Maybe you're building some sort of analysis another day, right? And so those are probably, for me, care about those two things. And then the next thing I look for here is, do I think somebody has the grit to, again, stick this through, again, your early stage, right?
Are you able to like get this from an interview, or are you hiring people that you work for or work with in the past?
I mean, if it could only be so easy where we could hire somebody, right? If I know somebody that fits the role, I always try to go for that first, right? Try to sell them on this. If I don't, then it's not just, so I think it's part of it's intuition, right? But I think you can get a lot of this through the interview process, but it's not through specific questions that you're asking, right? Not like that
intuition.
But the intuition should be based on what is, how is somebody reacting, right? Like what are the mannerisms, and the way the way I structure, our interviews is, yes, I have a set of questions that I want to ask them, right? But I actually give them the candidate a lot of time to ask me questions, and that tells you a lot, right? Like then you start to carry that into a conversation, and so it's part of it is just the style, right? Like of how you engage with these folks, and it's usually not over one interview either, right? And so when I go through a process, right, if I'm hiring, then I'll go to the team and say, okay, based on my initial interview with this person, I think they should be talking to X, Y, and Z person. Here are the things that I would want you guys to tease out. And again, I trust the folks that I've hired to then be able to, continue down this path. So, again, lessons learned. I've had to fire people in the past, and you can't say I'm, it's like an easy thing to do, but in this world, you hire fast, right? Like you have to do that process, and we'll see. Haven't had to fire somebody yet for our company, but we'll see.
Awesome. And that's it. You got about 3 minutes left until we're booted out again.
This is great. This was awesome.
Yeah.
I am. Yeah. What a cool experience to be an SF at JPM and just like in a Zoox, like doing this podcast, like all multi-dimensional experience here.
This is the most San Francisco thing you can do. You're like an AV doing a podcast at a lot of startups. Like it doesn't get more SF than this.
No, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, there's last party message. There's so many people doing good stuff out there just trying to fix healthcare, and it is, again, $5 trillion industry, right? There's enough room for everybody here as long as you're trying to do the right thing, right? And I think next 2 to 3 years are going to be super fascinating. I mean, the world is changing, and the world is changing quicker. The healthcare world is changing faster than it's ever had. So I'm excited.
Makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Thanks,
Awesome.
man. I really appreciate it.